program to bring you solutions for your day-to-day problems. We choose to take very practical aspects of our lives and then give you the light of Dhamma so that we can be happier than you are. We know most of us in the society are frustrated, stressful, and disappointed. Mostly they're sad. So we know very well Dhamma teaches us to be happy amongst those who are sad. So that is the prime objective of our program of Paths to Happiness. To help us with Dhamma knowledge, Dhamma teaching of our Supreme Buddha, we have invited a Manian Mahansa from Mutugala Dambadeniya Mahameunnavanagarica Monastery. Let us all welcome our Manian Mahansa to the program. Namo Buddhaya, Manian Mahansa. As the first topic of our program, we chose something very interesting and also quite close to all of us. There won't be any person who have never got angry. Yes, the topic for today is anger. We will talk about anger in detail so that end of the program you will realize how to be happy and how to not get angry and how to refrain from anger. So stay with us. We will tell you the teaching of our Supreme Buddha to help you be happier than you are. So to start our today's discussion, Manian Mahansa, what our Supreme Buddha, how has he explained about anger? What does it mean by anger with the use of suttas and Dhammapada? Could you kindly explain to our viewers what is it about anger? What is it that Supreme Buddha has spoken about anger?
Yes, before we get into talking about anger, we must first know what anger really is. And so we must realize that anger is something that we all feel. I don't think there's anyone in this world who does not feel anger, unless you're someone who has completely abandoned anger. And so what anger really is it's an unpleasant, a resentful, a feeling of displeasure upon seeing things we don't like. When we experience things we don't like, we feel angry. Or when we're in a very stressful situation, for example, then the chances of us getting angry is much higher. And also the Supreme Buddha explains that there are some people who are always angry. There's no reason, but they're always in an angry mood. So in this way we can see that anger is something that's always around us. And the Supreme Buddha explains there are actually different forms of this unpleasant feeling, or rather different degrees of this unpleasant feeling. The Supreme Buddha explains the first level of this unpleasant feeling is known as ill will. And what ill will is it's a very momentary feeling of unpleasantness, a displeasure. So for example, if you see someone who you don't like, you would feel ill will towards that person. It's a feeling of unpleasantness. And if that unpleasantness, if that displeasure continues further, then it can turn into anger, the Supreme Buddha has explained. And what anger is when that unpleasant feeling arises over and over again within you. So for example, suppose something happened and you got angry with a certain person, and then the next time you see that person, you feel angry again. You feel that unpleasant feeling.
You remember that
the situation.
You got angry,
exactly. Yeah. So now you have not stopped that feeling there. You have continued it with you. And so the next time you see that person, you feel that unpleasant displeasure, that resentful feeling again. And so that's considered anger. And when you become angry, what happens is you don't want, the Supreme Buddha explains in one sutta, when you feel this anger, you don't want to see the other person being successful. The Supreme Buddha explains, you don't even want to see that person sleeping well. You don't want to see that person having good friends around him. You don't want to see that person being successful in life.
You basically want him to be unhappy and sad.
Exactly, and that's what you want when you feel anger. And the Supreme Buddha explains when that anger comes to even greater degree, it turns into hatred. And when it comes to hatred, what happens is you come to the point where you actually want to take revenge from that person. And the Supreme Buddha explains when it comes to this point where you feel hatred, it can even continue from one birth to another. So it's very serious. So anger is something that we really must be very mindful of. And if we can try to get rid of that unpleasant feeling at the very moment, then it won't develop further. Yeah. And in fact, the Supreme Buddha explains there are 3 different types of people in this world who feel anger. And the Supreme Buddha explains one person's anger is like a line etched in stone. Now, what happens when you etch a line in stone? It's quite difficult to get exactly. Yeah. It's quite difficult to get rid of it. Yeah. The weather, the sun, or the winds doesn't take it away. So the Supreme Buddha explains for some people when they feel angry, that anger, that unpleasant, that resentful feeling doesn't go away. It stays with them for a very long time. And then the Supreme Buddha explains the second person is their anger is like a line drawn on the ground or sand. Mm-hmm. So if you draw a line on the ground or sand, it stays there for some time, but it disappears after some time.
With time, yeah.
Exactly. So the weather, the sun, and the wind kind of make it disappear. So the Supreme Buddha explains this type of person, he feels anger, he feels angry, but within a few days or maybe even within a few hours, he gets rid of that anger. So there are some people in this world who are like that. And then the Supreme Buddha explains there's also another kind of person in this world. His anger is compared to a line drawn on water. Now, when you draw a line on water, what happens? It disappears instantaneously, yeah. Isn't it? Yeah. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, for this person, he gets angry, but he gets rid of it quite easily. So, for example, the Supreme Buddha in that sutta explains, for such a person, when someone comes and blames you or say harsh words to you, he quickly gets rid of that anger, and the next moment he's friendly with you. He greets you, he mingles with you. Mm-hmm. So, the Supreme Buddha explains, these are the 3 types of people in this world who feels anger. So, I'm sure if you look around you, of your friends, of your family, you can see some people have anger that's like a line etched in stone. Some people's anger is like a line drawn on ground, and some people's anger is like a line drawn on sand, on water. Exactly. Yeah. So these are the type of people in this world who feels anger.
So we can invite our friends also to take a look at their own life and realize
Absolutely.
What type of anger they're dealing with.
Absolutely. And the thing is, the Supreme Buddha explains, for someone who has anger, it's quite difficult if you're someone who has anger like the first person we talked about, that is
line on stone,
etched in stone. Yeah. The Supreme Buddha explains, if you have anger like that, so that means you are someone who develops that thought, that resentful feeling within you. You don't try to get rid of it. If you're a person like that, and it's quite hard for you to develop further in life. However, if you're someone like the person who is a person like the line drawn on water, then the Supreme Buddha explains, for such a person, it's quite easy for him to develop further. It's quite easy for him to develop his mind further.
Because he instantly let it go.
Exactly. So he has qualities like compassion and loving kindness within him. He has the qualities like understanding and the quality of forgiving to others. So those qualities, those human qualities, helps him to develop further in life. So that's what the Supreme Buddha has explained in terms of the Dhamma about anger.
Also, we see in the society there are some people who seems to be very calm, very kind, and not seems to be getting angry. So with the look of it, by just looking at them, can we assume that they don't get angry? Are they the type that they never get angry?
Well, yeah, that's... from the first glance, some people do look like they're very peaceful and they're very calm, but the reality is, unless you're someone who has completely abandoned anger, that anger is within you. So, in one sutta, the Supreme Buddha explains a beautiful story. And the Supreme Buddha explains, at one time, there was someone named Vedehika. And she was very famous as being very meek and gentle and very peaceful, someone who is very calm in life, someone who does not get angry. And so she had a servant named Kali, and the servant wanted to know, she wanted to test
the patience.
Yeah, she wanted to test her patience and her to see whether it's actually true that she doesn't get angry. So what the servant did is, one day she got up really late. Now the servant is a very clever girl. She's very smart. She does all her work on time. So there's nothing that the lady Vedika has to worry about. So now one day what happened is she got up a bit late. And so Lady Vedihika came to this servant, Kali, and asked, Kali, why did you get up late? And so Kali replied, Madam, nothing's the matter. I just, got up a bit late.
No big reason.
Exactly. And so at that moment, by the tone of Lady Vedihika's voice, Kali figured out, oh no, there is anger within my mistress. And so she thought, okay, I'm going to test this further. And then the next day also, she got up a bit late. And then the next day, Lady Vedihika came and she asked Kali, her tone was a bit harsher than the first day.
Before,
yeah, and she asked, why did you get up so late? And then again, Kali replied, Madam, nothing is the matter, I just got up late. And so Kali knew, okay, it's true, then my mistress do feel anger within her. Now I'm going to test her out even more. Now on the third day, she got up even more late, and again, Mistress Vedihika was very angry. What she did was she took a rolling pin and she started to hit her maiden Kali, and of course Kali ran away and from the house, and she started to say, look at Mistress Vedika, who used to be known as meek and gentle. Look at what she did to me.
It's not what she looked.
Exactly. So from that, what the Supreme Buddha explains is, some people are very gentle and meek and peaceful for as long as they get everything they want. So as long as everything is done in the work, as long as everything is done in the house, then there's nothing to arouse the anger. But the moment things don't go the way they want, then that anger gets aroused. So what we can learn from that is the environment we are living in can really influence whether we get angry or not. So just because you may be peaceful and very calm in one place, when those conditions change, those thoughts of anger will surface and arouse. Yeah. So
we can ask our friends also to be watchful of the people that they associate, and then to see whether they cannot just come to conclusions. People don't get angry by the look of it.
Absolutely, yes.
So also, Manian has to go into our next question. Sometimes some people tend to know, almost justify anger. So it's a natural part of life. It's all right to get angry. To solve some problems, some conditions, you need to get angry. So such way they sometimes try to justify anger being a part of life. So is that right? Whether it's okay to get angry?
Exactly, that's true. I mean, being human beings, anger is something that we all feel for sure. That's actually the reason. That's one of the reasons that we have been traveling in this long journey of birth and death. Because of anger, we have accumulated a lot of bad karma in life, and that's one of the reasons that we are still in this long journey of samsara. And so, at first glance, it may seem to some people that anger is a natural part of life, and of course it is. And all beings feel anger, so not just human beings, even animals feel anger. As you know, when a dog doesn't get the food it wants on time, it starts to bark and bite. So even animals get angry. But what you must realize is, as human beings, we actually right now have the opportunity to control anger. We have the opportunity to control our mind. An animal doesn't have that opportunity. So if we think of anger as being a human nature, exactly, if we think of it as acceptable, then we're not going to make an effort to get rid of it.
So you think it's a part of your life, you don't need to do anything about it.
Exactly, and so you end up experiencing the distress and the frustration from anger, and you'll continue to live in that way. And so we must first realize then is anger is not acceptable. It's something that really harms us.
Okay.
And to illustrate this, actually, we have to realize that when we get angry, we can't even do a regular task that we can normally do. Exactly. You can think back at the last time you got angry. When you got angry, you can't think straight, isn't it?
You feel very uncomfortable.
Exactly, exactly. So that's a preliminary point. When we get angry, we can't even do a regular thing that we do. Actually, one day, a Brahmin named Sangarava came and met with our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, and he asked, Venerable Sir, sometimes what happens is those verses or those texts that I have been reciting for a long time, I'm not able to recall them. So he's asking, Venerable Sir, why is it that I'm not able to recall those texts that I have been reciting for a long time? All the more those texts that I have not recited for a long time. So he's asking, why is it that he cannot remember something very simple, something that he always recites all the time? And so the Supreme Buddha explains to this Brahmin Sangarava, when you feel anger, when ill will when that resentful feeling is within you, when your mind is overwhelmed by ill will, when your mind is overwhelmed and obsessed by anger, the Supreme Buddha explains, and you cannot think straight. You cannot know what's good for yourself. You cannot know what's good for others. You cannot know what's good for both yourself and others. So in that sutta, the Supreme Buddha clearly explains that when you get angry, you cannot know, you cannot see clearly. You cannot know what's good for you. You cannot know what's good for others.
That's why we hear saying, when you're angry, don't make decisions.
Make decisions, exactly. That's exactly why, because the Supreme Buddha clearly explains, when you get angry, you cannot think straight, you cannot see clearly, you cannot see as it really is, you cannot see reality. And to illustrate this point, the Supreme Buddha gives a beautiful simile. The Supreme Buddha shows, and suppose there's a bowl of boiling water, but it's bubbling under a fire. On a fire, and a person with a good sight, with good eyesight, goes and looks in the water to see his reflection. Now, can he see his reflection? No, because the water is bubbling, it's boiling. So the Supreme Buddha explains, just like a person cannot see his own reflection properly when he looks at a boiling, bubbling water, just like that, when a person becomes angry, he cannot know what's good for him, he cannot know what's good for others, he cannot see and know what's good for both. So in that way, you can clearly see that anger is definitely something that harms us. So we must realize this and make an effort to abandon anger.
So dear friends, if you think it's all right to be angry, well, it's not. So as Supreme Buddha has said very clearly, it is something that we should be refrained from. So make a personal note to yourself, anger is not a part of life. So also, Manyan Mahansa, what really causes anger? People get angry for so many reasons. What is the causes for anger? Why do people get angry?
Yes, I mean, the root of hatred is something that's within all beings that are traveling in this long journey of birth and death. But the Supreme Buddha explains, depending on the way you think, or depending on the way you perceive a situation, you can either choose whether you give rise to anger or not. So you actually have, through that, what the Blessed One is saying is, you actually have control of anger. You are able to control anger. And the Supreme Buddha explains, the way you perceive a situation and the way you think further is what determines whether anger arises or not. So I'll give you an example. Now suppose something that a lot of people do is go shopping in the mall, and if it's a very busy season, busy time of year, then there's a lot of
crowded.
It's very crowded, and it's quite difficult to even get through from one shop to another. And then suppose when you're walking with you're carrying a lot of bags in your hand, someone comes and brushes against you or steps on your foot. Now what's the natural reaction a person would feel?
You get very angry.
Quite angry, and you would start to blame that person, right?
With the condition and with the intention.
Exactly. And so you think, he did that intentionally, and so if you perceive that situation, the Supreme Buddha explains, you can perceive that situation in two different ways. So if you perceive it in a way that arouses anger, then you'd be thinking, oh, that person, all these people are always, stepping on my foot, they're doing these things. They are not, exactly. So then you're blaming others. They are not careful. Why couldn't they have gone a bit a bit to the side? And you perceive the situation in a way that you perceived it in a negative way, and now you're thinking in a way that promotes anger. However, if you think in the other way, if you thought, it's true that person did step on my foot and she did brush against me, however, I could have walked a bit to the side. If you think in that, if you perceive the situation in a positive way,
it was not intentional.
It was not intentional. He did, he didn't do it intentionally. Or I could have been more careful. I could have, gone to the side. There was more
crowd,
space.
these things happen.
These things happen. So if you think it in that way, then you're not thinking in a way that arouses anger, isn't it? So you're thinking in a way that really calms you. So the Supreme Buddha explains, the way you think has a big effect on whether anger arises or not. The Supreme Buddha explains, the way you perceive that situation and the way you think further through can determine whether unarise and anger arises, or whether arise and anger further develops. So it's really dependent on the way you think. If you can, make an effort and correct the way you think, then really in life you can have a good control of anger. Now, this is not easy to do, of course. As human beings, our nature is to always think in a negative way and perceive things in the negative way, in a way that arouses anger.
That's why we are in samsara yet.
Exactly. So the Supreme Buddha explains this Dhamma is for the wise, not for the unwise. Only a wise person can train his mind in a way that does not arouse anger. So it takes some wisdom for a person to train your mind in that way. However, if a person does do it, then indeed he can experience a result in this very life. Because, as you know, one of the qualities of the Dhamma is Dhamma Sanditthiko. So you can experience the results of this Dhamma in this very life. Then and there, exactly. So we must realize that the cause of anger is really dependent on the way we perceive something and the way we think through it. And if we think in the wise way, then we won't give rise to anger. If we think in the unwise way, in the foolish way, then we will of course always be giving rise to anger. So that's what we must understand.
All right, so we can ask our friends also to take a look at to think of their last moment that they got angry, and also feel the discomfort that they felt at that moment, and then it didn't really give a peace of mind, probably sleepless nights for so many reasons. So we invite you to next moment when there's something happens to get you angry, try not to get angry, as a man in Hans explained us, to think on the positive way, think of the brighter side, and try not to get angry and see how it feels, so that they themselves can, we ourselves can see the difference, feeling the sensation that is in us, so that the Sanditthika, the quality of Dhamma can be experienced on our own.
Yes.
So also, man in Mahansa, in the society, yet again, we always find reasons in the external environment. We get angry, that is an internal thing, you get angry from within, but you always find the reason to be outside, and you find someone or something to be blamed. And enough examples in the society. You go and something, you hit on at least the wall, you can even scold the wall for that, even though it's material. So we always find something in the society or somebody or something to blame. So is that right, and how should we deal with such a situation?
Definitely. I mean, as human beings, we always find a reason to blame another person. We don't take responsibility ourselves. But what we must realize is that blaming others, it only worsens the situation. So although we may find it as an excuse to, you know, I'm angry because you did this, you're like this, it's not going to help us find a solution. Now, for example, now suppose you're a working mother who had a very hectic day, very busy schedule, and you come home and you realize that dinner is not made and the house is a mess, and the children are just everywhere watching television, your husband is on the computer, you know, not doing anything. And so in such a situation, how would you feel? You would feel angry. And the first thing a mother would start to do is start to blame the children, start to blame the husband, and, you know, why can't you, you know, do something at home, and you start to blame everyone in the house. Now you have to look and see, when you start to blame your children, when you start to blame your husband, does that solve the situation?
It doesn't.
Most of the time it doesn't.
It
worsens the situation. What happens is, when you blame others, what happens is your children gets even more down. Their mood, you know, they get scared and they feel sad, and your husband gets even more upset, isn't it? So what it does is it really worsens the situation. So we have to understand this and realize the fact that blaming others and yelling at others, scolding others, is not really the solution to getting rid of anger and finding the solution to a problem. Now, if we go back to that same working mother, you know, when she comes home, she realizes that, no, you know, dinner isn't cooked and the house is a mess. If she at least has the ability to be mindful and refrain herself from not blaming others, then at least if she's calm and she herself start to do the work, and when the children sees it, what will they do? They'll
join and help.
Exactly, they'll at least try to join and help. Because so by controlling her anger, what she did is she kind of did something to help solve the problem instead of making it worse, isn't it? So we have to realize that although it's very natural for us to blame others, what it really most of the time does, it worsens the situation. So if we can be mindful and stop ourselves from being angry at that at least moment, and rather stop ourselves from blaming others, then we're actually stepping to solving the problem. And at that moment, if you can even think in a very understanding way and think, it's true that I did work a very busy schedule, but then, maybe my children had a very bad day at home, at school, or my husband might have had a quite a hectic schedule at his work. So if you think in a way that's very understanding, then that helps you to solve the problem and work your way out of the problem.
Yeah. Actually, you took a beautiful example from a household, how anger really works both ways, because mostly at home, either mother or the father gets angry, and finally who suffers is mostly the kids.
Yes.
So they should have that environment at home to be peaceful and to be happy as a family, so that there's no room for anger. So with that, dear friends, we take a short break and stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome back to Path to Happiness. We've been discussing today about anger. We discussed many things about anger so far. We discussed what is anger and why do people get angry, and also we gave you some exercise to do at home to see how you get angry, and to do not to get angry at another situation that you encounter in the future and see the difference to yourself. So let us again ask from Amani and Mahansa. There are different ways people express anger, and harmful ways, many different ways, and there are consequences. And what are these? How do people actually express anger, and what are the consequences of anger?
Definitely. When we get angry, different people express anger in different ways. When some people get angry, they don't speak. They don't say anything. They become very moody and they just go to a side and they just stay alone.
Yeah.
That's their way of expressing anger. But when some people get angry, they start blaming other people, saying harsh words to other people. And when some people get angry, they use their body to hurt others, so they become physically abusive. Exactly. And that's when violence comes to play. So in this way, different people have different ways of expressing anger. And what we have to realize is that the way we express anger can really have very harmful consequences. And if you think a single thought of anger in one person, it can develop within themselves, and it can even affect a whole society or a whole country, or it can even affect the whole world globally. So for example, suppose someone forms a hatred, or he gets angry and he starts to blame other people, and he starts to even sort to things like murdering other people. And because of that bout of anger, because of that bout of hatred, what happens is he continues that negative thought, that he continues with that negative thought of anger and hatred, and what happens is he starts to divide groups in society. So he says certain things, and he starts to gossip, and he starts to break people in society. And when this continues further, and it can even develop to the level where a whole country is experiencing a huge problem. Now, if you look at our history, of course, we can see if the world experienced wars, then most of the time it's a cause of a single person's angry thought or hateful thought. So you can see that a single person's negative and unwholesome thought can affect a whole world. And yeah, exactly. And it's what causes mass murders and wars, where thousands of people die and become hurt. So you can see that the way we express anger is quite different. And that's actually thinking about the external world. What does getting angry what does the effect of anger has on the external world? But if you really look at ourselves and how do we feel when we get angry, you can ask yourself that question. I mean, when we get angry, how do we feel? When we get angry, you can't even eat properly. Most of the people, when they get angry, they say, I don't want to eat. I don't want anything to drink.
They put aside is eating.
Exactly, eating. So they're really hurting themselves. They can't eat. They cannot drink anything. They cannot even sleep right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's that unwholesome thought in your mind is affecting your whole daily life, really.
It takes away your peace and you're uncomfortable.
Exactly, and you're always, those thoughts are haunting you. You can't sleep. I mean, try to sleep when you're angry. See if you can sleep. No, those angry thoughts are haunting you. You can't sleep. Not only that, in fact, that unwholesome thought can have a negative impact on your physical body. You know, your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases, and if you're someone if you're someone who constantly gets angry, that can really have a long-term impact on your health.
Oh.
Yeah, it can cause high blood pressure and can lead to heart attacks. Now, I'm sure you have heard some people get strokes when in certain situations where they are, you know, flashing with anger. Exactly. So that anger even has a impact on your physical health. And not only that, what's even more harmful is the fact that when you're angry, what you do with your body, as we discussed before, when you're angry, you cannot see the right from wrong. You cannot see what's good for you. You cannot see what's good for others. You cannot see what's good for either parties. And so what you do is you end up doing wrong things through body, through speech and mind. So for example, when you get angry, what you do is you end up hitting other people. Some people, you know, make schemes and kill other people. You know, killing human beings because of anger, because of hatred. And some people go and lie. And they try to break people's friendships. And when some people get angry, what happens? When that anger develops to a level of hatred, and thinking they want to take revenge, what people do is they go and engage in sexual misconduct. They try to break couples or break people's friendships. And in this way, people do many things that are unwholesome through body, speech, and mind. And the consequences of doing all of that is you end up in being reborn in bad worlds in your next life. Now, a very interesting story the Supreme Buddha explains is in sutta known as Mallika Sutta. The Supreme Buddha asks, and the Supreme Buddha explains a beautiful, very interesting consequence of anger. That is, Queen Mallika, who is the wife of King Kosala, she comes and asks our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha. She comes and worships the Supreme Buddha, and she says, you know, Venerable Sir, some women in this world are very ugly. She says they are very unpleasant looking. But some women are really pretty. They are very beautiful. They are very nice to look at. And then she also asks, Venerable Sir, some women in this society we see are very high status in society. They have a very good recognition in society, but some people have no recognition at all. They're just normal, very average people. Exactly. And also she asks, Venerable Sir, in society I see some people are some women, actually she asks these women, she asks some women are very wealthy, but some are not. So these are the 3 points that she makes, and she asks, Venerable Sir, what's the reason? And so in reply to that,
actually when you kept on saying that, it would be very interesting for our friends to know. So if some of them are ugly, and what was the reason, and then they can do something about it and then be much more beautiful.
Exactly. So in the sutta, the Supreme Buddha explains, O Mallika, the reason why some people are ugly is that in their past lives they were very much prone to anger. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, because of that anger, as a result of that negative thought within your mind, that caused you to be reborn as an ugly person, as an unpleasant person in this life. And those in their past lives who had loving kindness, who did not get angry, even when they are blamed, even when they are spoken to harshly, those people who did not get angry, those are the ones who are born, when they're reborn in the next life, those are the ones who are reborn as beautiful people. So in that sutta, the Supreme Buddha explains clearly, this anger is what really causes a person, what really leads a person to determine whether that person is reborn as a beautiful person or an ugly person. Exactly. I mean, you can really understand this by thinking it in this way. When you get angry, if you go to the mirror and look at yourself, you can ask yourself.
See it instantly that
exactly.
you don't look that good. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you become red, you become very dark.
Frowny.
Exactly. You're not pleasant to look at all. So that's the result of anger in this very life that you can experience in this very moment. And the extended result is that when in the next life you're reborn as a person who's not very pleasant to look at, who is unpleasant, not attractive.
Would want to look at you. Yeah.
Exactly. So not getting angry, even when you're being blamed, even when you're being spoken to harshly is the secret to beauty, really.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
Supreme Buddha explains the secret to beauty in that sutta. And just since it's interesting, I'll also address the other 2 points, where Queen Malika asks about jealousy, about why people don't have a good status in society.
Actually, Manas, before you get there, also
Yeah.
the other side of not getting angry or being kind, also that leads into us to get reborn as a beautiful people.
Exactly. So if you're someone who controls your anger and who don't get angry, if you're someone who has loving kindness within you, then of course in the next life, then you'll be reborn as a beautiful
Very
person.
beautiful. And
Exactly.
also when you're very kind and when you have that pleasant feeling in your mind, you instantly also you look beautiful.
Exactly. Instantly also
Yeah.
you feel
See
beautiful.
that.
Definitely. Exactly. And so in that sutta, Queen Malika also asks about the status, why there's a difference in status between women. And in that sutta, the Supreme Buddha explains those who don't have a good status, that means a low status in society, who are not recognized in society. The reason is in their past lives they were very jealous of others.
Okay.
And so what happens is those people, when they see other people successful, having a good house, having good families, having a good career, having good education, they feel jealous. They don't rejoice in seeing other people doing well.
Okay.
And so the Supreme Buddha explains the effect is, the consequence of being jealous is that in the next life, when you're reborn in the human world, you're reborn in very lowly recognized families, or you're not a recognized person.
Yeah.
You're just an average normal person. You don't get
Nobody
any place
notices,
in
yeah.
society. Whereas if you're someone, the Supreme Buddha explains, those women who have a good status in society, those are the women who did not feel jealous upon seeing other people doing well. So when other people were getting a good education, getting a good career, having a good family life, those people didn't feel jealous. They rejoiced in
They
seeing.
rejoiced,
Yeah, and as a result of that wholesome thought, when they are reborn in the next life, the result is they get a good recognition in society. They get a good place in society. And the last one Queen Malika asks is about being wealthy. As you know, in the world today, we see some women are very rich, they're very wealthy, they're very well-to-do, whereas some people, they have a hard time finding a meal for the day.
Exactly.
So there's this difference in society. And again, the Supreme Buddha explains the reason is those women who are very wealthy, who are very well-to-do in their past lives, what they did is they gave alms. So they gave things to other people. They gave food to other people, they gave bedding and clothing to other people, they gave houses to other people. So they were very generous. So they had a heart of generosity. As a result of that good action, in the next life, what happens is,
You're rewarded.
exactly, they're rewarded and they're very wealthy. They have nothing that they don't have. And the other side is, if you're someone who don't give, if you're someone who's very stingy, who doesn't give at all to anyone, then as a result of that unwholesome action, in the next life, when you're reborn in the human world, you don't have a good way of supporting yourself. You're born in very poor families, and you have to sometimes starve through life. So it's the Supreme Buddha explains these are the consequences of your own actions.
Yeah, that is a very interesting explanation about why some people are ugly, why some people are beautiful, and why some are wealthy, why some are poor, why some part of the society have very good status and some are not even seen, not even recognized. So that leads us to our final questions for the program. As much as we spoke about anger and what causes it and the consequences in quite depth, so it is also very much helpful to explain to our friends what do we really do about it and how can we really overcome anger, because we'll be very interested to know, and the actions, what should we really do and how should we practice to get rid of anger in this birth itself, if possible.
Yes, it is indeed possible. And what we have to first realize is that our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, is someone who completely abandoned anger. So the Supreme Buddha completely abandoned anger and then taught us how to abandon anger. And so we have to realize that we are getting the solution from someone who actually experienced the state of non-anger. So then we can really understand that it is indeed possible to be anger-free. In fact, from the moment the Supreme Buddha attained perfect enlightenment over 2,600 years ago, for the 45 years the Supreme Buddha lived as the Buddha, there isn't a moment in the Supreme Buddha's life where anger has arisen. There's not a moment in the Supreme Buddha's life where the Supreme Buddha has said a harsh word to anyone. There's not a moment in the Supreme Buddha's life where the Supreme Buddha, where other people were affected because of the Supreme Buddha's unwholesome actions. So there is not a moment of anger, because the Supreme Buddha completely abandoned the root of anger, the root of hatred. So we must first realize then it is indeed possible to get rid of anger. And once we know this, we must also ask ourselves then, why do we get angry? Why do we feel anger? Now sometimes we do feel anger, don't we? When we're angry, we know we're angry, but we cannot do anything about it.
Probably we don't want to. We sometimes enjoy being angry.
That's a good thing that you said. There is the fact that you don't want to, and the reason is the Supreme Buddha himself explains there is a gratification of anger. So there is a gratification side, and what happens is the ordinary person gets caught up with this gratification, and he continues in this long journey of samsara. Now, to understand this gratification, I'll give you an example. Now, if you take a baby, for example, that baby himself, now suppose that baby is trying to walk and he goes and hits something. And once he hits something, what happens is when he feels the pain, he starts to cry. And then he says, if the mother comes and say, I'll hit the toy that hit you. And then when the mother hits the toy, what happens is the baby feels happy. The baby feels gratification in seeing the mother hit the toy. So we can see through that, even as a baby, there is a sense of gratification through anger. And so what happens is that gratification, we get caught up with that gratification and we continue through. And most of the time, what happens is when we get angry, when we feel hatred, we find gratification by seeing other people hurt, by taking revenge from other people. So we have to realize then there is a gratification side to anger, but what that leads to is even more harm. Because in trying to find gratification, what we do is we hurt other people, we lie to other people, and we rejoice in other people being unsuccessful. And that's that's a very bad thing to do. And so we have to realize this fact, and then understand the fact that that anger is actually dangerous. So understand the dangerous side of anger. I think throughout the program we did talk about the dangers of anger, not only to ourselves, not just even physically, but it has a long-term effect on your
samsara.
In terms of samsara, and not only yourself. The fact that you get angry can have an effect on other people, even a society, can affect a whole society negatively. And so in reply to this big problem that we all have, this flame of anger, the Supreme Buddha explains the way to extinguish, put out, cool down this flame of anger is loving kindness. So our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, is the greatest person who has the most loving kindness in this world. You cannot compare the Supreme Buddha's loving kindness to anyone in this world. And so the Supreme Buddha, having loving kindness, having spread loving kindness, having a heart of loving kindness himself, our great teacher introduces this principle, this new principle to us, because loving kindness is not something that that's a natural part of us. It's something that we have to build in ourselves. Because if we had loving kindness within us, then chances are we would have been already out of this samsara. But what's really natural part of us is the anger. And so the Supreme Buddha explains this is something that you really have to build in within yourself. And so in order to do that, you have to spread loving kindness. And what loving kindness in Pali, it's known as metta, and what metta means is friendliness. And so you have to understand, if you're friendly towards yourself, then you would never hurt yourself, would you?
No.
And if you're friendly towards others, you wouldn't hurt other people, isn't it? If you're friendly towards your neighbors, if you're friendly towards your family, then you wouldn't go and hurt their feelings. You wouldn't say things to hurt them. You wouldn't do things to hurt them. So in this way, the Supreme Buddha explains, metta is friendliness. So you are supposed to promote friendliness, isn't it? And when you do so, what happens is, the Supreme Buddha explains, you think in a way that promotes friendliness.
As opposed to anger.
As opposed to anger. And so what happens is you think things like in the train of thought, like, may I be free from anger, may I be free from ill will, may I be free from hatred, may I be free from physical and mental suffering, may I be free from jealousy, and may I live happily. So you think in that, so that positive way of thinking, that train of thought, and then you little by little gradually extend your thought to others around you. So may all beings in my house be free from anger, be free from ill will, be free from jealousy. And this way you extend it to other people. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, in doing this, the Supreme Buddha explains, you must spread loving kindness in such a wide aspect, where you spread loving kindness like a mother looks at her only son,
child,
only child. Now you have to understand this. In order to understand this, we have to kind of look into it. Now, if you take a mother, how does she love her only son? All her love, all her kindness, all her love is directed towards that son.
She'll give in anything.
Exactly, and even Supreme Buddha explains, she will even give her life to save that person, that child. So all her love is directed towards the son, and even if that son does, or son or daughter, the child does something wrong, then that mother forgives the son, isn't it? And
forgiving and very kind towards
exactly.
the child.
So that love, that loving kindness, that friendliness that she has does not change even if your child does something bad, because that's something that's within a mother. And so the Supreme Buddha explains, that's how you must look at the whole world. Now it's not easy, isn't it?
Not at all.
Exactly. It's not easy at all, but it's something that you can develop. Now what you have to realize is, now suppose there's someone, and when he gets angry towards a certain person, maybe he won't go and hurt him physically, or maybe he won't go and say words to hurt that person. He won't do it. He won't do any act outwardly. But when you're angry with a person, when that person becomes unhappy, when he gets down, when bad things happen to him, seeing that, you enjoy. You rejoice in it. Did you understand what I said?
Yes.
Yeah. So, however, if that same thing happens to your own son, you would never rejoice in seeing your own son being unsuccessful. Your own son, if something bad happens to your own son, you would never find pleasure in seeing it.
You have that personal affection towards your own
You have
son.
that affection.
Yeah.
You have that affection towards that son. So the Supreme Buddha explained, this is how you must look at the whole world. And you can imagine, if all people in this world have this thought of friendliness within their heart, then you won't see any of these conflicts, you won't see any of these fights in this world. And what you have to realize is, loving kindness is not something that you have to only spread towards your own family or your own friends. The Supreme Buddha explains, this is how you it's universal. This is how you must look at the whole world. That's how the Supreme Buddha looked at the whole world. No matter, regardless of your religion, regardless of your race, regardless of which country you live in, this is how you must look at the whole world. So it's a very wide perspective. It's a widened mind. So you need a widened mind in order to think in this way. So the Supreme Buddha explains, if you think in this way, then you're able to put a stop to anger. You can stop anger from arising. You can stop unarising anger from arising, and you can stop abandon the arising anger. So when you get angry, what you must do is, you must become mindful of the fact that you're angry and start to spread loving kindness. And little by little, as you develop your train of thought, as your mind becomes widened, you'll be able to spread, you'll be able to look at the whole world in the way the Supreme Buddha explained. And what you have to realize is, this anger is something that we all feel. It's a universal feeling, isn't it? You don't have to be a Buddhist to be you cannot say like that. All people in this world, all people of all religions feel anger. And so regardless of who you are, which following you teach, if you practice loving kindness within you, then indeed you will be able to experience that state of anger freeness. So this is something you have to understand. And the other thing is, as you practice loving kindness within you, what will happen is, you will be quickly able to realize the next moment you're angry. Because now you're very conscious, you're very mindful. So it helps you to develop your mindfulness. Because remember, loving kindness, if you go back to one of the questions you asked me is what causes anger, and we talked about how it's the train of thought that really determines whether anger arises or not, right? So what spreading loving kindness does is it guides you, it directs you in thinking in the right way, thinking in the wise way. And when you think in the line of thought, the next moment you become angry, you quickly be able to be mindful of the fact that you're angry and try to make an effort to get rid of it. However, if you're someone who's always angry and you think that anger is acceptable, anger is okay, then there is no way.
Go anywhere.
Exactly. So that's the importance of introducing loving kindness into your life.
Like you said, Manasi, is that right to think like anger is something that we have been carried with us in our samsara?
Yes.
So likewise, can the loving kindness also can travel along samsara?
Well, it's if you're someone who start to practice loving kindness within you, then if you practice it to a certain level, then of course that feeling of loving kindness can come with you to the next life. That's why there are some people in this world
naturally kind.
Yes, they are naturally kind, that they naturally have that feeling of loving kindness within you, but it's something that you have to develop. So because until you abandon anger
completely,
yes, until you abandon completely, anger is within you. So you have to realize that. But when you develop the meditation really to a high level, then that wholesome thought can indeed go with you. But through loving kindness, what your ultimate goal must be to completely abandon anger and become free from this long journey of samsara. So,
absolutely. So, dear friends, we have come to the end of the program, and we discussed a lot of details about anger. We discussed about what is anger, what causes anger, and how we react to anger, and the negative consequences of anger. So, anger is something that we all should refrain from, and we also, most importantly, learned today how should abandon anger. It is to spread loving kindness. So we invite all of you to spread loving kindness and abandon anger, and to be that kindest person in the world. Also, let us take this opportunity to share all our merits that we collected throughout the program to our Manian Mahansa for the precious Dhamma teaching that she shared with us, and may triple gems bless you. Namo Buddhaya.